Welcome back to another episode of the Organizedpreneur podcast, where I help female entrepreneurs get organized, get heard, and get leads using my launch, host, and grow methodology. And in fact, I'm always sharing something that I believe entrepreneurs should be doing right now, either launching a podcast or getting organized or getting heard or getting leads, what have you, right? So I'm super excited about this episode today. Today's topic is the juice worth the squeeze, and talking about the real ROI of starting a podcast. And so these most primarily these episodes are based on people who submit a question about podcasting or business. And so I love doing these because these are real answers. Real people have real questions. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. So I'm your host, Eldrima Harper. And so let's kind of dive into this episode today. So, have you ever had one of those moments where you were thinking, or you were sitting at your laptop and you just had this blank document and you're thinking, do I really want to start a podcast? Or is it worth the time or the energy? Do I have enough to say? Is anybody listening? Those are some of the questions that you might be asking yourself. It definitely was one of the questions that I asked myself when I first launched my podcast back in 2013, which I pretty much share this on every episode, that my first podcast only has 12, I think it has 14 episodes. So I'm going to start saying that right now. It has 14 episodes because I did not know what I was doing. I did not have a strategy. I did not have in mind or on paper an ROI of what my podcast what was the return of investment of launching a podcast. I just like podcasting. Okay. So don't be like me, or don't be like I was back then. All right. So, but if you've ever felt that way, then my point is that you are not alone, because so many entrepreneurs that I have coached, including coaching myself, come to this exact moment, right? Like they might be on the edge of a really powerful episode and they start to question their return of investment of time, return of investment of energy, return of investment of focus, return of investment of podcasting, period. Is this really worth it? And so today we're going to be breaking that down and honestly being honest and transparent about the whole thing, and from a perspective of myself, who's launched 3 podcasts. Okay. And again, based on people who asked the questions about podcasting. I've coached many entrepreneurs in this area, whether it's business or whether it's efficiency. And trust me, I have a lot to say. So if you've been wondering if the juice is worth the squeeze, let's just talk about it. Okay. So, let's just say you're a service-based entrepreneur, and I primarily work with service-based entrepreneurs. Okay, female service-based entrepreneurs. But maybe you're a coach, you're a therapist, you're a strategist, you're an organizer, you're a creative, right? And you got clients that you love to work with, but maybe you're tired of posting all day or 5 times a day, going on Instagram, chasing trends, trying to stay relevant on social media, all of the things. I don't know about you, but I can tell you that I get tired of that. And so, and if you're wondering if all of that is even worth it, then you're in the right place, because the goal is, and I know this is what you want just as well as what I want. You want more qualified leads, right? Not just followers. You want visibility that lasts, but not fleeting TikToks. I am not on TikTok, so you'll understand all of this in just a moment. It'll all make sense. But really, all you want to do is just build trust without feeling like you need to show up everywhere 24/7. And the deal is you really don't need to show up everywhere 24/7. I personally am on LinkedIn and YouTube. I do post not as consistent. As a matter of fact, I may even stop posting on Facebook about my business and my podcast because it, quite frankly, I'm just not sure. Even as I ask myself the same question, I'm not sure that I'm getting the right ROI for that anyway. So you may want to just narrow things down. You may want to streamline your focus, just like what I'm doing, because as I've mentioned before, podcasting has a lot of moving parts, and so does having an online business. So you want to work more efficient and not be all over the place, right? And so you don't need to show up everywhere 24/7. Okay, you just need to show up where your clients or potential clients are, and you need to show up where you are getting the most bang for your buck. Okay, whether that's I don't know, time buck. I don't know anyway. But the thing is, you start noticing, and this is hypothetical, this is not based on anyone else particularly, but maybe you started noticing that your favorite entrepreneurs have podcasts, and they talk about how it brings in clients while they sleep, and how it positions them as a go-to expert, how their episodes keep working for them, weeks, months, and even years later. And you might begin to wonder, should I do this? What you doing, Willis? Should I do this? Will this start paying off for me? And to be honest with you, that is the question that you should be asking yourself. And that's the purpose of today's episode. I'm just being quite honest here. Most podcasters, look at podcasting through the wrong lens. They feel like podcasting is supposed to make the money. And I'm not saying for some entrepreneurs it does not. What I am saying is that if you look at it from a lens of my podcast has to make money, then you might be looking through the wrong lens. Because as I've said time and time again, it is an ecosystem. Okay. Podcasting is one of the ways that you can get leads so that it feeds into your ecosystem. So podcasting, just like creating content on any other platform, is how you can start getting leads. And so the podcast itself is not the business unless you are teaching people how to podcast like I do, right? But new podcasters tend to look at podcasting through the wrong lens and think that podcast is supposed to make the money. And that is not the case. Or the podcast is supposed to go viral. That is not the case. Or the podcast is supposed to get me thousands of downloads. That is not the case. It's not always the case. But here's the OrganizedPreneur Truth. Your podcast is not the product. Okay? Your podcast is the pathway to your products. And so when you approach podcasting through that lens of strategy and not popularity, then the return on investment is undeniable. Okay, you do get an ROI. Okay, so let me just kind of break it down. I'm going to break it down through my launch, host, and grow method, and because that's where everything kind of flows from, right? So okay, and I know I keep saying that, but just like anything else, your podcast should have some components to it. So whether it's your podcast, whether it's your business, whether it's your any content that is supporting your business, This is how you get an ROI from launching a podcast, from the launch phase. So there are five components: your purpose, your person, your positioning, your plan, your platform. That's what I teach in the Launch, Host, and Grow method. Okay. When you launch with clarity, it all becomes easier. Why you are launching your podcast, right? When you understand why you're launching your podcast, you're going to create content that converts, not content that confuses people. Because when you confuse people, the people that are listening, they're not going to buy. All right, they're just not going to buy because they're confused, and so they're just going to go somewhere else. It's like, I don't even know what does she want me to do? What is she talking about? What are they talking about? So you got to understand your why in terms of your podcast. And many people launch because it seems fun, like I did. That's why there's only 14 episodes on that podcast. You can go listen to it. It's on YouTube. It's called Organize Your Enterprise. 14 episode that includes the trailer. Okay. But most people launch because it seems fun. But if you are an organizedpreneur, you want to launch with intention. Okay. So that is the purpose. Okay. So the first one is your purpose. Make sure you understand that. The second one is the person, right? The clearer you are about your ideal listener, the more they will binge, the more they will share and eventually buy from you. They may not do it from your podcast, but they may do it from your email list. The clearer you are about your ideal listener, and when you talk about what their needs are, because they don't care about anything else other than what's in it for them. All right. So that's number 2. Make sure that you're clear about that. Number 3, positioning. Your podcast positions you faster than almost any other platform. Your positioning, a podcast does position you better or faster than almost any other platform. People are listening to podcasts over anything, almost anything else. When you're on social media and you're posting stuff, they're mostly just scrolling. People are just scrolling. Okay. But people are starting to rather trust a podcaster more than just, like a random Instagram account or a random Facebook post. So that's positioning. So that was what? Number 3. Yeah. All right. Number 4. I got to move faster than this. So, plan. Okay. A plan. A plan prevents podfade and burnout. That's why I only have 14 episodes on my first podcast, because there's two of the biggest reasons that people never see results. It's podfade and burnout, right? Like, they get tired, they start getting burnt out because they're not seeing the results. Okay. So I'm going to the thing that you want to keep in mind, you've heard me talk about my framework called APACT. APACT. It's a method that I apply to getting organized, that I apply to podcasting, and I apply to business. Okay. You want to assess where you are. You want to prioritize. You want to make sure it's in alignment. You want to create something that is those 5 P's, right? Those 5 P's: the purpose, the person, the position, the plan, and the platform, right? So, but you want to make sure that you are creating according to those 5 components. Okay. So you create content, right? And you make sure that you are looking at those 5 areas. Then you track your results. Make sure that it's working, and the things that are not working, you stop doing those. Give it time. All right. And the last one on that is platform. Trying to be everywhere 24/7, right? But you want to choose the right platform. And then you want to consider whether you want to do audio, video, or a hybrid. You'll see most of them are audio. But now I'm actually doing video. Your audience may have a preference. And you also want to consider whether or not your topic requires more of a video or of an audio. All right. So just keep all of those things in mind. So that's what you need to consider when it comes to platform. All right. Okay. So let's move on to section 3. All right. Once your podcast is live, this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay. This is where the return begins to roll in, if you will. All right. The trust ROI. People trust the sound of your voice more than they trust your social posts. Ouch. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just being very, very honest here. Okay. So they will listen to you because it helps to build the know, like, and trust factor. So people trust the sound of your voice. Listeners may say, well, I feel like I know them, right? I've been binge listening or binge watching, right? Like, you're in my ear every morning. I mean, I have some podcasts that when they I have selected the notification to come on and when they come on, I'm leaned in. Okay. So it helps to build that know, like, and trust factor. And so I'm saying the same thing. Like, there's, like I said, certain podcasts, like, they're in my ear every morning or however often their episode goes live. So there's a level of intimacy that's created for your clients. That's what creates the clients, and that is an ROI. All right. So the trust factor, the time factor, right? The time ROI. One episode can create infinite repurposing or regenerating of your content, right? Like, you can turn one episode into a reel, a blog post, an email, YouTube videos, carousels, lead magnets, courses, workshops, what have you. All of those things. Okay, so you can actually start from just one episode of your podcast. Now, again, I don't encourage you to be all over the place 24/7 and burning yourself out. However, you are going to have to show up in different places. And so that can be determined, at some point, depending on, what your podcast is all about and where your audience is. Launching your podcast, you stop creating content from scratch and you just start creating content from strategy. Because if you start with your podcast, and then you start repurposing, everything starts to be in alignment, right? Like, one thing supports the other, and then so forth and so on, right? So that is the time ROI. Okay. So the first one was the trust ROI. The second one is the time ROI. And then the lead generation ROI. Now, I have a framework. I'm not going to get into it, but I can just tell you what it's called. It's called the Dream Flow Formula. Okay. DREAM. Mwah. All right. But, so the D stands for discovery. And again, what I'm going to do is I will put the link to the Dream Flow Formula, the entire flow, in the show notes of this episode. Okay. But the important thing I want you to remember is that the D stands for discovery. Okay. So it is your discovery engine. That's what the D stands for. All right. And then, but because listeners find you through AI search, they find you through Spotify, Apple, YouTube, guest features, keyword ranking, all of those things. And that's how your podcast works to bring people to you, right? So that is your lead generation ROI. So that's number 3. Number 4 is your system ROI. Okay, this is all, again, ROI stands for return of investment. So with systems and templates and workflows, podcasting becomes easier, faster, and more sustainable. And that's what you want. You want that to be a sustainable part of your ecosystem. Okay? So that's what happens when you have systems and templates and workflows and those things, right? All right. So let's move on to the grow phase. So I talked about the launch and then the host and then the grow phase, right? That's what we're talking about now. So the grow phase is about audience monetization and scaling, right? So this is where people want to know, they want to know more about the money. Like, okay, show me the money, show me the coins, right? And so, because I do get that question all the time, people ask, okay, so how do I monetize my podcast? How do I make money on my podcast? And most people that one of their first questions is, how do I get sponsors? That is not what you should be thinking about, in my humble opinion, when you first launch a podcast. Okay, that is not where your mind should be. Maybe it could be a long-term strategy, okay, but not immediately, right? So let's get into that. So here's how the money comes in terms of monetization. So the audience, let's just talk about the audience and the monetization and the scaling. So I'm not going to get too much into anything else, but I am going to talk about indirect monetization, because most podcasters want to make money from direct monetization, which is where people look for sponsors. Okay, I say sponsor yourself. All right, that's what I do. I sponsor myself. I don't have any sponsors. Now I do have affiliate partners and companies and organizations that I have formed a partnership with, right? But that is another way to monetize, but we're not going to get into that right now. Okay, so let me just stay focused. Okay, so the indirect monetization shift is where most podcasters make money because of their podcast, not from their podcast, but because of their podcast. Okay, your podcast becomes the foundation of your marketing ecosystem, because this is how you're going to convert listeners into coaching clients, consulting clients, digital product buyers, event attendees, right? We haven't talked about that, but that is a part of the launch, host, and grow, and we're not going to get into that right now. But course students, membership, excuse me, members, speaking invitations. This is where the ROI compounds. Okay, this is where it compounds. Okay, so imagine if you are charging $1,200 or so for your program, and a listener finds your show. So, right, that, trust me, that does happen, right? A listener finds your show, they binge 5 episodes, they book a call, and then they enroll. That's $1,200 from one listener, right? Without the ads, without the daily posting, without chasing trends, all of that stuff. That is ROI. Okay, that's ROI. So, and so let me bring this to a close. Okay, how about that? I'm sure I've been on here for quite a few minutes, but the reason that some podcasts don't see ROI is not because they lack talent, but because they lack strategy. No clarity, no funnel, no call to actions, no positioning, no systems, no consistency. That's why the launch, host, and grow methodology changes everything, and it works so well. Okay, so so the topic was, so is the juice worth the squeeze? You bet. Especially when you launch with intention and when you have systems and when you grow with purpose. You got to understand how podcasting works. It works as a business engine, okay? As a business engine. So your podcast becomes your marketing, visibility, funnel, lead magnet, authority builder, connection tool, revenue amplifier, and legacy project, okay? You can build a legacy with your podcast because it's out there pretty much forever, right? So all right, so listen, if this episode has helped you to understand the real ROI of podcasting, and you're ready to take the next step, then I invite you to jump on a strategy call with me. Okay. And on that strategy call, it is complimentary. On that strategy call, we will talk about where you are now and where you're trying to go and fill in the gap. Maybe you have a podcast and you're like, I already have a podcast, so how do I create an event for it? Right. Or maybe you have an event that you do. How do I turn that into a podcast? Or maybe you have a business and you want to know, how do I launch a podcast that connects with my business, right? So if that is the case, then you want to get on a strategy call with me so that we can talk about it. It is absolutely complimentary. Um, and I don't offer them normally. I don't offer them um, always, but I am offering them now at least until the end of, at the time of this recording, the end of 2025. And depending on how those go, I will continue, to do that. So, yeah, I hope all of that made sense. I hope you enjoyed it. I always like to leave you with a scripture, and the scripture is Proverbs 16:3 is one of my favorite scriptures. So I may have mentioned this scripture several times on several episodes, right? But the scripture is Proverbs 16:3, and it says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans." So remember, get organized, get heard, and get leads. That's where you want to be. I thank you for listening to this episode today, and I will see you on the next episode. Have an amazing day. Bye bye.